Over 5,000 people confirmed dead after Monday's earthquake in Turkey and Syria. The death toll expected to mount exponentially as winter temperatures hamper the search. The international community dispatching help to Turkey and Syria. Turkish authorities have just declared a 3-month state of emergency with 6,000 buildings in 10 cities destroyed. Thank you for joining us for this special edition here on France 24. First, the death toll from Monday's earthquake in Turkey and Syria continues to mount. Over 5,000 people have been reported dead after the strongest quake to hit the region in nearly a century. Rescue workers are now racing against the clock to pull out survivors trapped underneath the rubble. But harsh winter temperatures are only making matters worse, and there are fears the death toll will rise exponentially. Been felt since Monday's earthquakes. According to the United Nations, up to 23 million people could be affected in its aftermath. Over in Turkey, a week of national mourning has been declared by the president, and a state of emergency has been announced for the next 3 months. The country's disaster management agency has confirmed that over 6,000 buildings have collapsed, resulting in rescue operations spreading thin. Viewers are warned that some of the images in this next report may be disturbing to some.
Amidst the rubble and debris, this resident is searching for any sign of life until a faint scream becomes audible.
As you can see, there's a dead body here. He is dead and nobody has removed him. And I can hear a woman's voice underneath.
Here in Hatay in the south, people are desperately waiting for help to arrive to pull more out from the mountains of wreckage.
We heard them. They're calling out, asking for help. They asked to be rescued. We cannot rescue them. How can we rescue them? Nobody has come since this morning. Nobody. We have nobody. Look around.
With the magnitude of the disaster, emergency services are overwhelmed, and it's a race against time to find and extract survivors. Thousands of buildings collapsed throughout the day from the ripples of a 7.8 magnitude earthquake. And a few hours later, a second jolt nearly as powerful as the initial quake struck over 100 kilometers away, further spreading the scale of the damage. The tremors caused thousands to be trapped under ruins, more buildings to topple, and caused scores of people to take refuge wherever possible. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has declared 7 days of national mourning as global offers of aid pour in, including from NATO and countries across the European Union.
We can now go across to France 24. Shona Bhattacharya standing by in Adana, Turkey. Shona, Turkish authorities have just announced a 3-month state of emergency. Just talk us through how bad things really are there.
Well, actually, I'm in Hatay, in Antakya, the city where part of that report that we just played was filmed, and I can confirm everything in that report. It is a nightmare. It is apocalyptic. We are in a war zone without the violence. I mean, you have dozens upon dozens upon dozens of buildings, of residential buildings, of commercial centers, of petrol stations, of stores. I mean, if the buildings, some buildings are still standing, but they're completely to one side. They're diagonally standing. It's just a matter of time before they collapse completely. We spoke to people who were desperately crying. I mean, desperately looking for help to get their family members out of the rubble, and some people saying that just a few hours ago they could still hear the voices of their loved ones trapped under the rubble, but that as time went on, those cries became more and more faint, and that they stopped hearing them altogether. Now, the emergency services have started coming in. Finally, we have seen in the last few minutes several military helicopters with aid, but until now, the means that these rescue teams had, the ones that had arrived a few hours earlier, were insufficient. They didn't have the bulldozers or the cranes to lift up these sunken buildings that are sometimes several stories high and that house sometimes hundreds of people, and with many of them still trapped.
And Shona, residents are trapped amid freezing temperatures. Talk us through, destruction in terms of infrastructure, in terms of roads. How did you yourself and the team get there?
Well, we are based in Istanbul, and we flew by plane to Adana Monday night. That flight itself was very complicated because it was delayed by 3 hours for weather conditions. Even in Istanbul, the winds were so strong that planes were not always taking off on time. Many other flights to Adana and other parts of the affected areas were just canceled. But once we arrived in the area, Adana is one of it is in the earthquake zone in the areas that are affected, but it is less affected than many other cities, much less than here in Antakya and Hatay, for example. There are about a dozen, less than a dozen buildings that collapsed, and there are dead there. There are injured as well, but the scale of destruction is not as big. The roads are generally in okay condition. The only airport that is closed because it was damaged in the earthquake is the one here in Antakya, in Hatay. And one of the reasons, it's important to know, one of the reasons that Hatay in particular is so damaged is because even though we are at more than 200 kilometers from the epicenter of the earthquake, it is along the same fault, the seismic fault that goes directly to where the epicenter happened in Kahramanmaraş. So the infrastructure is poor. We're talking about roads, but also electricity. Some places are out of electricity. With other places, you have gas pipes that are broken. You have fires that are breaking out. Phone service is also very spotty. In the center of the city of Antakya, we had absolutely no service whatsoever. Now we're a little bit on the outskirts of the city, and we have it here. It's just very unpredictable, and it's a very moving, chaotic, and frankly, it's really apocalyptic situation we have here. You can hear the sirens. It is a nightmare.
Shona, while you were speaking, we were displaying images on the screens of apocalyptic scenes. We had Turkey's president who spoke a short while ago, and he announced a 3-month state of emergency. He did say that 70 countries had offered their help to Turkey. From what you're seeing, is it just Turkish teams who are doing the relief right now, or when you were through the airport, did you see international organizations? What did you see?
Yes, I saw a plane arriving from Romania, but this is such a large affected area. It's over 8 provinces. So even though Adana is a hub for those rescue teams, be they domestic or international, the international rescue teams are outnumbered, thankfully, by the Turkish rescue teams, who are growing in number as not only the professionals are here, but also many volunteers coming in from all over the country, from all over Turkey, to help. There is a French team that we've been in contact with, but the communication was so bad, the network was so bad, we weren't really able to have a conversation. But they are here as well, and people are just waiting for them to do their jobs and help out.
Shona, thank you very much. Keep us updated. Shona Bhattacharya reporting that for us from
Thank
Hatay.
you so much. Thank you.
We can now bring in Rama Al-Sheikh, a Syrian, a recent student of journalism who's based in Kilis, Turkey. Thank you for speaking to us here on France 24. You personally have been impacted from this earthquake. Can you tell us how you are doing? How is your family doing? It seems we lost that connection. We'll try and get Rama back. Now, dozens of countries have dispatched rescue teams, engineers, and search dogs to help Turkey after an appeal from the country's president. Aid to Syria, meanwhile, has been made more complicated with frayed diplomatic relations between Damascus and Western states. Nicholas Washworth explains.
This girl is trying to warm her feet at a makeshift campfire in the town of Kahramanmaraş, the epicenter of the second earthquake in Turkey on Monday. Several families gathered to try and keep warm. There was snow at the weekend and temperatures are around 0 degrees Celsius during the night.
We'll be cold here until morning, freezing, getting wet. We have no place to go, nowhere to stay. We don't even have a bed.
Our houses have been damaged. We can't go inside them. We haven't eaten a thing. Our children are so hungry. May God protect us all.
Dormitories were set up in gyms, schools and mosques to get people out of the cold. However, many people, fearing new tremors, preferred to spend the night outdoors.
Our home was not destroyed, but no one is going back there because it's dangerous. Our furniture shop is in a mess. It's ruined. The windows are shattered. That's why I'm standing outside in front of it. I'll stay here round the clock to prevent pillaging.
In the town of Malatya, further north, residents struggled in freezing rain, covering up as best they could, and relying on the bare essentials to hold out for a time before the arrival of desperately needed humanitarian aid.
We can now bring in Anne Avril, Director General of UNICEF France. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. Now, UNICEF says it's estimating that thousands of children may have died in this earthquake in both Turkey and Syria. Where is this number coming from?
Yeah, it's an extremely heavy toll for children, and so far we really have no consistent numbers, but it's probably thousands of them because it was nighttime. They were sleeping in their families, so and as you know, they are the most vulnerable. So we got some numbers, but it's too early to have a...
And the fact that it's winter doesn't help, does it?
No, winter. The climate is extremely rude in this region, and we really have to focus on preventing children from epidemics, outbreaks, from the cold, and from winter, which is really extreme in this area.
And this area had a lot of refugees living, people who had fled the war in Syria, in neighboring Syria. How is aid being dispersed to people there now, specifically when it comes to UNICEF?
To give you an example, in northern Syria, the affected region is about 4.1 million people who are living in the area, and 2.7, so two-thirds of them were depending on aid. Already.
Yeah.
The appeal for the humanitarian appeal for this region, for Syrian people, was more than $3,050 million. So it was already a huge, massive aid that these people required. And now we are estimating the needs, but it will be probably much more. So we are adjusting the support that we are providing. It's complicated because access to people is it's a logistical nightmare.
I mean, we just spoke to our correspondent who told us it is, just buildings crumbling, and it's getting around will be difficult. Talk us through how aid will be sent to Syria when it comes to UNICEF. How are you dispatching aid to government-controlled areas of Syria?
We were already on the ground, so we got the networks. We know how we can have the best access to population. We also had some logistical hubs in the region. We had one in Amman, one in Lebanon, one in Turkey, in Gaziantep, where we have a massive support to refugees. So we are already established in the region. But yeah, we will face some very hard difficulties to manage to get access to people, and especially in this chaos.
In the short term, what do people need, especially those who make it out alive? They will need shelter, they will need food. What pressing needs will they have, and especially children? Clearly, this is very traumatic for most people, these scenes, and for children no less.
Yeah, the absolute priority is to provide safe, cleaning water, safe-drinking water, because if not, children will not survive, and so as you can imagine, it's a challenging thing because all the facilities are destroyed, so we have to give safe-drinking water, and so we have purified water with tablets, so it's complicated, but it's not impossible. Then have a shelter to find
stay warm,
stable, and food, because we all know that these people were already in a very vulnerable status before. And then also to help the families to find the relatives and because many children are isolated, they have lost their parents.
How would you do that in terms of connecting children with their families, and especially in Turkey they're saying 10 cities have been impacted. Same thing with Syria. Who knows the scale of this destruction in areas which we don't even know about? How do you connect children to their families or parents?
So we are first putting them in a safe shelter because, and then we are trying to find some relatives. We got the names or some people who knows them, but really the absolute priority is to put them in a safe shelter.
Good luck. You have your work cut out for you at UNICEF. Clearly, it's a very difficult time, and wish you all the best. Anna, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Joining us. Now, dozens of countries have dispatched rescue teams, engineers, and even sniffer dogs to help Turkey after an appeal from President Erdogan. Aid to Syria has been made more complicated with frayed diplomatic relations between Damascus and Western states and the sanctions which remain in place.
Heeding the call for assistance, this team of French rescue workers and firefighters are flying to Turkey to aid rescue efforts. In their bags are much-needed medical supplies.
We're going to do our very best to help the Turkish population by searching for victims as well as by providing needed medical aid. And we're going to do all of this as part of internationally coordinated relief efforts.
The European Union has activated its civil protection mechanism, mobilizing over 10 search and rescue teams. It's also made its Copernicus satellite system available to provide emergency mapping services. Teams from the Netherlands and Romania have already left, bringing blankets and tents. While in Germany, these humanitarian crates are filled with food, water, blankets, and medicine. More rescue teams are expected from dozens of countries, including Spain, the UK, Poland, and Serbia. Greece and Sweden, which have strained relations with Ankara, have also offered to help. The Swedish government says it will donate 600,000 euros to rescue organizations on site. The U.S., too, has vowed to assist its NATO ally, as well as provide humanitarian aid to NGOs in Syria.
The president has authorized an immediate U.S. response. We are in the process of deploying additional teams, including 2 79-person urban search and rescue teams to support Turkish search and rescue efforts and to help address the needs of all those who have been hurt or displaced by the earthquake.
In Syria, the situation is made more difficult by 12 years of civil war. Hundreds of families are still trapped in the rubble of collapsed buildings. The 300 Russian soldiers stationed in the country have started clearing the debris in their search for survivors.
We can bring in our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons, now. Rob, a short while ago we had the Turkish president who declared a 3-month state of emergency. Could this disaster we're seeing in Turkey, we spoke to our correspondent, Shona Bhattacharya, she explained just apocalyptic scenes. Given the scale of this crisis, could this affect, potentially even delay the election?
It could do. I mean, the state of emergency, as you said, is for 3 months. That's just before the elections are meant to take place in May. It may come down to a political calculation in the end by President Erdogan. He'll look and see how this is playing out nationally, whether it's having a negative effect on the way that the government is perceived in Turkey at the moment, and make a judgment based on that. He could delay it, could continue the state of emergency for a bit longer, although the cut-off point for holding the elections is meant to be June the 18th of this year. So that doesn't give him, theoretically, at least, an awful lot of room to play with there. But, it is theoretically possible. And Recep Tayyip Erdogan will remember the last time there was a major earthquake like this in Turkey, back in 1999 in Izmit, not very far away from where this earthquake took place, again on a massive scale, 7.6 on the Richter scale. Almost 20,000 people died. And although the election wasn't until 3 years after that, one of the factors that was believed to have played a part in the defeat of the coalition government at the time was that earthquake and the inadequacy, or the perceived inadequacy, of the government's response to it. And one of the criticisms was of the failure of the government to ensure that proper safety standards and building codes were observed. I'm sure President Erdogan will remember that date because it was Erdogan and his AK party, which came into power in 2002 after that, and partly as a consequence of it. So he may well be thinking about that, at least in the back of his mind, and worrying too that some of the same criticisms could come round this time.
Let's talk about Erdogan for a second, because could this, I mean, over the next 3 months, I think he's going to be judged, it's fair to say, and that could either keep him in or out of office, because we know how he's done when it comes to the economy, rampant inflation, what have you, in Turkey. So it comes down to this.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that could go wrong for him. On the other hand, he may get a fillip from it as well. But you're right. The economy is not in good shape at the moment. Inflation is very high at 80%. Unemployment is growing. The national currency, Turkish lira, has fallen by 30% against the dollar over the last year, having fallen before that against the dollar as well. But, the government in the last few weeks has been going on a spending spree, building houses for the poor, making it possible for people to retire early. Might sound strange in France, but yeah. They're talking about that. And it's going to be a calculation on the part of Erdogan, because this is going to cost a lot of money. But it'll, in the end, I think it'll be, how does he perceive that this is playing out with the Turkish public? He may get, as I was suggesting, he may get a boost because if the response is seen to be well organised and effective, that may work in his favour, and there may be a sort of moment of national solidarity, this moment of national mourning. Yeah. He may get that benefit, but there is a risk for him that things could go badly wrong, that there will be criticism because of the perceived failures, if there are any of the rescue effort. And criticism is already coming in, despite the fact that the government says it's dispatched 13,000 rescue workers to the affected areas. So we'll see. It's going to be a difficult calculation for him.
Thank you very much for that, Rob. Rob Parsons there. We can now speak to Rama Al-Sheikh, a recent graduate in journalism based in Kilis, Turkey. Thank you for speaking to us here on France 24. You personally have been impacted from this earthquake. Can you tell us if you and your family are safe?
Hello. We are now at street, and we don't know what will happen, and we don't know where we go. It's a very scary moment.
And do you have rescue officers around you, personnel? Where exactly are you?
We are in Kilis now, in street. We don't know where we go because last night we slept at tent, and that very worst night. Because the weather is raining and the water coming over there, and it's very cold. That's very scary.
Very scared. And is anyone from the Turkish government, any officers, anyone around to help you?
Yeah. The police officers and the AFAD and local organizations trying very hard to help us, but the people is very much. They are very many and much people at street, because no one now stay in houses. Everyone at street. We are. Don't have any enough food or any medicines.
So you need food and medicine, and what about, where are you sleeping now? Are tents being provided or anything like that?
I speak with my friends at Kahramanmaraş or Malatya. They told me they are maybe dining because they don't have enough food.
Rama, I wish you the best, and I hope you can find the necessary help and shelter which you need. I'm glad you have your friends with you. Thank you for speaking to us here on France 24.
Thank you. Can I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
We now thinking about preparing to help the other cities like Kahramanmaraş and Malatya. We will search about food and take what we need. Then we will send the other countries, the other cities.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. We can now bring in Charlotte Auberti from our Info Migrants team. Charlotte, good to speak to you now. You just heard there we spoke to a recent graduate of journalism graduate, a Syrian girl living in Kilis, Turkey. So like her, a large number of displaced people in the region live where this earthquake happened.
Yes, there's an enormous number of Syrians displaced in the area. More than 3.6 million Syrians found shelter in Turkey in the past decade, especially in the areas close to the border with Syria, of course, because many hoped they could come back to their homeland when the situation gets better, more stable there. So they stayed in the vicinity. As an example, in the region of Gaziantep, there are almost 500,000 Syrians. This is approximately 1 inhabitant out of 5. And in Syria, the northwest part of the country, which is the part which has been the most impacted by the quakes yesterday, is also the only region of the country which is no longer controlled by the forces of Bashar al-Assad. It is controlled by rebels. So this is where a lot of people running away from the government-controlled area are currently living. According to estimation, around 2,000 displaced people are living there. This influx has seen the area's population more than double since 2011.
And talk us through the conditions people have been living in, and what about today after the earthquake?
Well, thousands of displaced people live under tents. I'm going to focus on the northwest part of Syria here. But there is also a significant number of them who live in structures that were built in the past decade in order to deal with the population influx I just talked about. Now, these buildings are very fragile. They've been made in a rush and often with what people had to hand. And on top of that, well, the country is at war, so they've also been damaged by bombs. So the extent of the damage and the number of casualties that we're seeing in the region now can be explained by the fragility of those structures. But it's also important to talk about the poverty of those displaced people, whether in Turkey or Syria. Approximately 2.5 million people in northwest Syria depend daily on humanitarian help to survive.
Indeed. That's what the UNICEF's Director General told me earlier. Thank you very much for that, Charlotte Auberti, there from France 24's Info Migrants team. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching.